A room without books is like a body without a soul. Welcome to a very special edition of Hidden Heroines of History. As we step into 2026, we're officially declaring this the Year of Literacy. Across the Atlantic, from the bustling cities of the United States to the historic villages of the United Kingdom, the power of the written word is being reimagined. We're diving into why literacy is the ultimate hidden superpower and how, together, we can ensure no one's story goes unwritten. History is about to turn a new page. The past isn't silent, it's buried. Welcome to Hidden Heroines of History. I'm your host, Gayvin Powers, a published author, award-winning screenwriter, and storyteller who brings women's history to life. Welcome, everyone, to another episode on Hidden Heroines of History podcast. I'm Gayvin Powers. Today, I have the lovely Clare Draycott of C.E. Draycott Writes on Facebook. And I have a special guest coming to visit who is Jane Austen's niece, otherwise known as Caroline Knight, who is also the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation's founder and chair. This year being 2026, literacy is so important, and a lot of really amazing women have paved the way all these years, whether writing their own stories, encouraging others to learn to read, to write. And so I wanted to start off this year kicking it off with literacy. There's some amazing programs that have been going on for a while that I think you'd like to hear about, and some really amazing stories that we're going to share. So go ahead and hold on. We've got a good show for you today. Let's go ahead and welcome Clare. Welcome, Clare. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure, Gayvin. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. We're going to be talking about literacy today. And Clare, you're over in the UK. I'm in the United States. Before we get started, we have a great special guest that we'll be bringing on, Caroline Knight, Jane Austen's fifth great niece. So that's going to be a little bit later in the interview. And until then, I'd love to hear from you, Clare, what you love about literacy, what literacy means to you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it before we dive into some really amazing programs that have been going on for years and are happening now that people can do and get started. So take it away, Clare.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to say how wonderful it is that you've got Caroline on. I watched the first podcast with her and she was fabulous. So I'm a huge Jane Austen fan, as you know. So it's really exciting that you've got her on. So that's wonderful. What is literacy important to me? It's a question that I didn't think about for many years because reading came so easily to me, which sounds like I'm boasting. I'm not meaning to boast. I remember being in primary school and I was desperate to read. Reading was something I saw going on a lot at home. So I was desperate to be able to read. My dad read to me when he was home from sea. My mum read to me. So yeah, I really, really wanted to read. And we were told we were going to start reading, and I imagined it would be with a book, and we had to sit in rows, and up on the board they had, or the wall I think it was, they had pictures of the alphabet, letters, and then an object that began with that letter, and then we sat, and it felt like it went on for months. It probably was only a couple of weeks or so, but when you're 5, a couple of weeks feels like forever. So it felt like it was happening for months and months and months, but we would just chant, is for apple, B is for bus, blah, blah, blah. And each day they said, we're going to do reading. And I think, a book, please, let it be a book. And it was more, it's for apple, B. And I was like, oh, goodness, will this ever stop? And then the blessed day arrived finally when the teacher said that we were going to read and she was going to give us all a book and we would each go up to the desk in turn and read to her. So I was waiting my turn. I was done alphabetically. So Draycott, it was a little bit down, but not too far. So I was reading my book while I was waiting. And I think I'd read it through about 3 or 4 times before I got called up to the teacher's desk. So I trotted up with my book, put it on the desk, opened it. She said, okay, Claire, would you like to read? And I think she was expecting me to do what everybody else had done, which was to sort of painstakingly sound out a few words and stumble and then I say, well done, yes, so take it away and carry on. Instead of which I opened it up and went, Peter, this is Peter. So, hello, Peter. This is Jane. Hello, Jane. And Peter does this, Jane does that. And I'm just turning the pages. And to this day, I don't really know how I was doing it because I'd never read before. I'd just done a lot of chanting of letters and sounds. And I think the only way I can understand it is that something must have clicked in my brain, that the sounds that we'd been chanting forever equated to what was on the page. And that if I just sounded things out, I would get the words. When that's sort of clicked for me, I just sort of flew. And I didn't think anything of it at the time because I was 5. Why would I? But looking back on it now as an adult, I just think how remarkably lucky I was that it was so instantaneous for me, because I think I don't think that's necessarily the norm. I don't have no idea why it was instantaneous, but it was.
Yeah, I don't think that is the norm for many people. If I look back at when I learned to read, I remember my mom reading to me every night before bed. I would always get a story. The reading was always a part of our life. I loved it. I couldn't wait to read as well. I just remember, we talked a little bit about this before. When I first started reading, I was in a group set aside to read, and a girl next to me, well, she was doing pretty much what you were doing. And I remember looking at the letters going, what are those letters? What are they? What is that? How does she know that that's that? And I was the next person up, and I just thought, I'm not going to be able to say this. I have no idea the words that are coming out of her mouth, how they're matching these symbols that are on the page. And I just remember it was my turn. And then I looked at it and my mouth just started moving and the words came out and there was no awareness. I don't know. To this day, I don't know how this connected with this, but somehow they connected together and I was saying the right things, even though I wasn't able to totally connect all of it. So there must be some study somewhere that explains all of that. But that was my experience. It was sort of trial by fire and shock and awe. Oh my gosh. And somehow I survived.
Yeah, I completely understand that panic. That it was so clear that you were panic stricken, thinking, "I'm not going to be able to do that." And that must be, I think, to go back to the question of what does it mean to me, I am so grateful that I don't have to experience that panic.
Right.
Literacy for me has been something that has provided me with world of adventure. I can go into pretty much any world I like, and just the minute I open the covers of a book, I can explore something new. And whether that be fiction or non-fiction, whether that's Googling things on the internet, it's given me a way of exploring the world, and without having to feel any sense of panic, because I can do it so naturally. And I think if you can't, to have that sense of panic about the written word day in, day out must be awful. I mean, so I'm just so grateful.
And imagine adults who have that panic when they're driving down the freeway or they're trying to order something at the grocery store.
Yes.
Or
Or out
they
with
go
friends.
out with friends, or they take their children to the doctor and they're not sure how to fill out the forms. Imagine having that panic and not being able to read, which is why it's so important that there are programs for adults to be able to read, because it's a life skill and it definitely inspires their children to be able to read as well and get along. And I know that you found a really great statistic about people who read. And do you want to share that with the audience?
Yes, certainly. So I've had to make some notes, so I will have to keep looking down.
That's all right. We both have our notes.
I can read really well, but my memory's not brilliant. Yeah, there's a few things, but it was a study that came out, as I say, sometime in the 2000s, I think. Don't hold me to that. Which said that children who are read to every night by their parents have a vocabulary of 5,000 words by the time they're 5. And children who are not read to at all have, on average, a vocabulary of about 50 words by the age of 5.
Wow. 50 words. 50 versus 5,000. That's
Yeah.
huge.
I mean, it really is. It just goes to show how vital it is that, because obviously the greater your vocabulary, the easier you find it to communicate verbally, never mind the written word. The more words you have at your fingertips, the easier it is for you to communicate what it is you want, what it is that's frustrating you, what it is you need, and so on and so on. So that's just crucial. It's an absolutely vital part of childhood, really. So the National Literacy Trust, again, this is in the UK, found that 1 in 10 children aged 5 to 18 do not have a book of their own at home. So they don't own a book at all.
1 in 5.
1 in 5 between the ages of 5 to 18. And
That's
again, it seems unimaginable to me. I mean, I remember my dad reading to me,
mm-hmm.
and when I was in bed, and he'd be, he'd get in late from work and he'd be tired. So when I was sort of 3 and I couldn't read, he would occasionally try and turn 2 pages at the time so that he could shorten the amount of time he had to read to me. And I would just sort of look up at him as if to say, "What do you think you're doing?" And then just push it back, because of course I knew the pages by which what illustration was on the page. And if he'd clicked an illustration, I would know. So I'd just reach out. His dad said this little finger would just reach out and push it back. Didn't say anything. Just,
To dad.
what do you think? Can't shortchange me. But, so, I mean, we find that all humorous and everything, but I can't imagine not having I had loads of books by the age of 5.
Right.
I mean, there were Ladybird books about different fairy tales like Cinderella and Rapunzel and things like that. But they were there. They were on the bookshelf in the bedroom. It was part of the fabric of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I just find it awful to think that not everybody has that opportunity.
It is awful. And imagine being an adult and you have children and your children say, "Mommy or Daddy, please read me a story," and you can't read. And what a horrible feeling. I remember my mom, this was when I was in college and she was just working. I remember her telling me one afternoon she was so proud of a student she was teaching. I'm like, "You're not teaching anymore. What do you mean you have a student you're teaching?" She was working with an adult man who, I think he was in his 40s at the time, that didn't know how to read, and she was teaching him how to read, and she was just quietly teaching him. It wasn't anything that she shared with the family. She was just super happy because he had achieved a certain level of being able to read, and she was just ecstatic, so she shared it with me. But I think the unsung heroes in a lot of this are the teachers, are the people that volunteer, are the parents that every day that dedicate, even 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes to read to a child. Those moments not only create memories, but you're helping your child become independent. You're helping take them to another level in life that they wouldn't have access to if you didn't share that with them. And so I was so proud of my mom when she told me that she did that, and he was so excited because he had spent years not being able to read a menu. So
Gosh.
can you imagine going to a restaurant and not being able to read the menu? I mean, you could see the pictures, you could point at something and kind of guess what you thought it was, but how horrible. So imagine that does to the self-esteem too.
No, absolutely. I mean, I guess if, it's a sort of restaurant situation, you've got to wait for somebody to order something and then just say, "I'll have the same," or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, very difficult. It must be dreadful. But it's interesting what you say about your mother teaching the adults to read, and bless her, that is a wonderful thing for her to do. Tony Blair, he launched Quick Reads, which the reading agency agreed to run for him.
Mhm.
So the reading agency was an agency set up by a wonderful lady called Miranda McKerney. She set up this agency precisely because there are adults in the country who struggle with reading or can't read at all. And obviously, having problems with literacy doesn't mean necessarily that you can't read anything, but it can, there's a range of
Mhm.
ability, and they
Mhm.
catered for them all, which was lovely. And so on World Book Day 2006, Tony Blair launched this thing called Quick Reads,
Mhm.
which, as I say, was run by the reading agency. And the point of Quick Reads was that it was short fiction
Mhm.
written, and the writers were given a sort of specific range of vocabulary that they could use for
Mhm.
each different level.
Mhm.
And the stories, the fiction, was written by published authors, really well-known, well-selling published authors, so that people were reading something that was adult appropriate. Because, of course, an awful lot of reading material up until then for teaching adults was the reading material that's used to teach children. And that's not
Mhm.
appropriate for adults. And so they came up with this idea of actually producing a range of books that had adult storylines and that would actually be of interest to adult learners. And I just thought
Great.
that was a brilliant, brilliant idea.
Mhm.
And I didn't quite, hadn't quite twigged who would set it up. But when I was teaching English as a foreign language, I had some ESOL classes. So this is English for speakers of other languages. So this was teaching people like asylum seekers and so on who were coming over to the UK with the intention of staying.
Uh-huh.
And they needed to obviously learn to speak English, learn to write English, and so on. And our library had some of these books.
Uh-huh.
So I took the various classes that I was teaching down and said, we've got short novels here that you could read in English, but they are for adults and they're different, lots of different levels. So if you're on intermediate level, you can read these books, and they were all color coded, and it was really cleverly done. And I just thought that was a really good thing. I have no idea how many of them took it up, but I did show them that they were there. So I just thought it was such a good idea.
It is a good idea. It's really good. It also reminds me a little bit, I know English is a second language, people are dealing with different things to overcome, different barriers and resistance points to overcome to learn English. But I also know that people who have dyslexia have issues to overcome while trying to learn to read as well and have learning differences. And there was a study that came out of, I believe it was Harvard did a study several years ago, and several of their students who were, A students were struggling to pass the foreign language, and it's because they had dyslexia. And so they did a study testing them with the Orton-Gilliam method, and based upon chunking up information and teaching them foreign language in a different way, which is also how you teach students who have a learning difference so that they can learn to read as well. And then the students started excelling. And so, I mean, these are the brightest of the brightest that we have that were struggling because they had learning differences based upon dyslexia. And there are things that can be done to help people as well. So it's important to find out if, whether people have access to books, number one, but then also do they have a learning difference that could cause another barrier on top of it. But once you know what it is that you're working with, then you can address it, then you can attack it, then you can find a way to overcome it, and then it can become your superpower.
That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know how long's that method been around? Do you know roughly?
Claire, so you wanted to know how long the Orton-Gilliam approach has been around? So I just looked it up, and it says it's been around for nearly a century. It was developed in the 1920s and 30s by a neuropsychiatrist, Dr. Samuel Orton, and educator, Anna Gillingham. And it was done to help students with word blindness. That's what they're putting in there, which was also word blindness is what they used to call dyslexia, combining a multisensory systematic phonics for reading and spelling. The term Orton-Gillingham approach first appeared in print in 1966, but the methods themselves stem from Orton's work in the 1920s and his collaboration with Gillingham in the 1930s, making it a foundational, longstanding method in dyslexia remediation. So huge. That's amazing.
That
I
is.
had no idea.
No, nor me. Well, I've never heard of it until you mentioned it, but really brilliant. It's really brilliant. But isn't it interesting though that, that was developed in the 1920s and 30s. And yet when I was at school in the 70s and 80s, people with dyslexia were being overlooked. And,
Mhm.
they weren't really on the ball particularly. I don't know what it was like in the States, but here in the UK, a lot of people with dyslexia were overlooked and sort of dismissed, which is awful,
Mhm.
because I have a number of friends who are dyslexic and they're all very intelligent people.
I do too. I have one friend, and she's brilliant. She's a science teacher, and she got diagnosed with dyslexia in college, and they looked at her results and were just shocked when they saw her brain scans come back, because they were like, this really should be hindering you, but you must be using every bit of all the other skills you have to be getting through. They were super impressed with how she had found a way on her own to be able to bypass all these other elements that were putting barriers in there for herself. And I think a lot of people had to do that.
Yes, it's interesting that you should say that because as a flute teacher,
Mhm.
I found not when I first started teaching, I wasn't really very aware of it when I first started teaching, and because I started teaching the flute in 1997, but in the sort of, I suppose, T10s onwards, I became much, much more aware of dyslexia and how it
Mhm.
affected students. I didn't realize that print could sort of leap about
Mhm.
on the page in front of their eyes. And, trying to imagine reading when the print won't stay still and
Mhm.
it's switching lines, I don't know how they do it. I really don't. So I think I'd done a course or something, at one of the schools that I was working at, and they'd covered some methods for teaching dyslexic children.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a few flute students who were really struggling to read the music.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, I wonder if what happens with printed word on the page is happening with the printed music, because obviously with music you've got a 5-line stave and then you've got little black blobs all over at
Mm-hmm.
various points. And I thought, if that's moving around and jumping about and wiggling and doing weird things in front of their eyes, then it would explain why they're struggling to read it. And of course,
Absolutely.
when you're reading music, you're combining letters with another type of symbol. So, what I discovered was that I just tried with a few of them and said, I'm just going to pop this music onto I'm going to photocopy it onto a sheet of pale green, pale pink, pale blue, and cream paper. And I want you to tell
Mhm.
me if any of them make it easier for you. I never forget this. I put a green one down in front of one of my students and said, this is the piece we've been learning all term. I've just put it on green for you. Does that
Mhm.
make any difference? And she looked at it and she went, oh my God, I can read it. And I said,
Man.
it's giving me chills now just remembering it. In the practice room, I was like, oh my word, I've had such tingles. And I said, are you being serious? Can you? And she's like, yeah. I said, why would I lie? She said, no, I can read that. It's staying still and I can see it. And I was like, oh my goodness, wow. So all of my students that were struggling to read paper, I took a photocopy of something they were playing and on 4 different colors. And I just said, just tell me which one is easier for you to read. And once they knew which color worked for them, I would just copy their music onto that color. But it was such a simple thing. And it made such an enormous difference. It just got me thinking, well, if these things are spotted when children are 5 rather than when they're 14, what kind of a difference would that make?
You were talking about how important it was to intervene early in the first 5 years of life, and I know we've talked about this before. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that because I know you have some really great resources you want to mention.
Well, yeah, I do feel like the earlier you can intervene and discover these problems, the better, really. What got me thinking about early years development, really, was Princess Catherine, the Princess of Wales's first 5 years initiative. She launched this a few years ago. I remember, I don't know if it was in lockdown. She sent out this
Mhm.
survey to sort of the general public, anyone could fill it in to sort of talk about the first 5 years of life and what you thought were important things. I can't remember any of the questions now, but I remember filling it in. And since then, she has been working with various, with her own first 5 years initiative, but also reaching out to other organizations about the first 5 years of life. And they've covered a whole range of things. I don't think, from my research anyway, I can't see that they actually specifically cover literacy. But the point that she has made over and over and over again is just how important the first 5 years of life are. And, in the first 5 years of life, everything that's influencing the child is what is going on in the home,
Hmm.
because primarily that's where they are most of the time. So their influences come mainly from their parents and
Mhm.
any other people in the family home, any other family members. So it was looking at the importance of that, so various interactions, but also obviously modeling behavior. And this again is where having books in the home, seeing your parents read, normalizes reading. If you see the people around you reading, older siblings, parents, etc.
Mhm.
Very small children want to mimic their parents. So although it's not directly talking about literacy, it is talking about the impact of seeing behaviors like sitting down to read a book.
Absolutely. And that creates memories, that creates bonding, that creates connection. And Dolly Parton, she has the Imagination Library that's been going around since 1995, so for 30 years. And that has actually helped over 200 million people throughout the United States, the UK, throughout Ireland, Canada, and Australia. And Dolly is absolutely in line with Princess because she also believes to intervene within the first 5 years, get children reading. Now, Barbara Bush, she has her foundation out here too, and she's unfortunately passed on now, but she was considered the first lady of literacy out here in the United States. And she has her foundation, and her focus was more on get the adults reading. And then through the adults, the children will also learn. it doesn't matter at what stage you're at. The important part is get in wherever you're at. If you're a child, you have the opportunity to read. Hopefully you've had parents or Dolly's influence coming in to help you with that. If you missed it and you're older, hopefully you're working with a librarian, a teacher, the local library, through Barbara Bush's foundation, something to help you as well. Reading is so important. And this is actually a great place to go ahead and mention the interview with Caroline Knight, because she talks about the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation that she founded and she now chairs, and how important it is and how they have programs worldwide as well. And she has such a wonderful story. It just completely blew my mind. As you mentioned, she's wonderful and witty, and
Exuberant.
she's exuberant. Yes, she's lovely. She is a great advocate for the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation, for Jane Austen in general, and to be a part of that family. So let's go ahead and listen to that clip from her. Caroline, would you like to go ahead and share with us about the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation that just launched in the United States? Because that's really exciting too.
Yes, so the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation is an organisation that I started in 2013. Also, that was sort of prompted by the 200-year anniversary of Pride and Prejudice. The celebrations around that anniversary really just brought in sharp focus for me. Jane has become this global phenomenon, and how many people around the world don't just read her work, but love her. And I think there's an opportunity there to sort of, extend Jane's legacy in a different way. And the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation, our mission is to connect through literacy, because we absolutely believe that literacy is the key to connecting with each other, connecting with the world around us, being able to function in life, and obviously also connecting to a world of imagination and possibilities, which is obviously what you find in the words of a book. And so we launched in 2014, and over the last 11 years we have grown into, it has far exceeded what I ever dreamt it would be. It really has. When we were planning for 2025, which is obviously a big year, Jane's 250th birthday. A few years ago, when we were saying, right, what's our big goal for 25? Let's have something, that would just be an amazing milestone. And opening the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation in the US, that was the goal that I put up there and thought, if we could do that, that would be amazing. I was a young girl growing up at Chawton House. The only overseas visitors really then were Americans. Jane Austen at that point, without the internet and movies and things, now you get visitors from literally all over the world. Yes. Whereas then it was mainly Americans. So I grew up talking to Americans about Jane Austen. The Jane Austen Society of the UK, their AGM every year was in a big marquee or big tent. You don't use the word marquee, but a big tent which would have 500 people sat in it with a stage, and that used to happen on our lawn at Chawton House. So every year all of these people would come, as I said, lots and lots of Americans, and I was just so in awe of the adoration that they had for Jane. And things like that. Those were the critical moments of my childhood that meant that I've known from a very young age how special Jane Austen is, even before I could appreciate it myself, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Does.
Far before I was reading it, far before I was old enough to do that, you could just tell, because as I said, people would come from America for the day for that event and fly home again. And so I've always known that America gives us a huge opportunity to expand the impact of our literacy work, and that's the important bit. So I am actually quite recently back from a trip to America. So I was in the US in October, where in Colonial Williamsburg, I was absolutely delighted. We did a big event there, and I was absolutely delighted to formally declare the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation North American Friends open. So if anybody would like to get involved in the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation North American Friends, you can find them online, and there's a volunteer page on the website that you can just put your details. One of the important bits is it means that people in America, you can tax relief from the donation. But it also just means that people can volunteer and get involved on a local basis. As I said, it'll go an enormous way to increasing our impact across the world and in the US.
That's wonderful. You're doing so much good work.
Jane would tell stories, and without any television or any entertainment at all, everybody sort of did something, didn't they, to entertain in the evening or in the afternoons or whatever. And she was encouraged, and her father would encourage her to read books in his library, and she was well educated and properly educated.
Right.
So that sort of encouragement of her to be her was
Hmm.
there, which, as you say, is extraordinary. And when I think about the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation, sometimes that's sort of one of the things I think about is, I mean, we what, you know, there could be another Jane Austen out there today, but they're in
Hmm.
India, in
Right.
an impoverished place, and they can't read and write. You know,
And you,
it is, as I said, and when we think about what actually made Jane so successful, and this is a phenomenon. I mean, there were so many. There were so many bits of luck in this story. You know what I mean? That had to come together, which starts right with being born. You know, being the
hmm
product of parents who absolutely believed in female education and empowerment and women having a voice.
absolutely. And you never know who is going to get that experience with an education, with literacy, who's going to get inspired and take their dreams or their imagination and create, like you said, the next Jane Austen novel, the next literary masterpiece. You never know. And
Yeah.
giving people that opportunity is a really beautiful, freeing gift, I think.
Absolutely, and of course, even for the people that don't go on to do that sort of thing, of course, literacy is,
It's
you know,
huge.
literacy means that you can. It means that you can read a medicine bottle. It means that you can read a road sign.
Right.
It means you can, you know what I mean.
It means,
It's very fundamental, as well as being, of course, a route to
yes.
creativity.
It means you can have a job. It means you can support yourself. It
Yes,
means you can be independent, which is really important for people.
yeah, and one of the most impactful moments I've ever had with the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation, I was in India, in
Mhm.
in a very sort of impoverished part of Delhi, looking at some of the work that we fund there,
Mhm.
and I was talking to the mother of a 4-year-old through an interpreter, and I
Mhm.
was talking to this mother, and I asked her what her hopes and dreams were for her child, and she said that her dream for her child is that they were educated enough that they would be able to get a job inside.
Oh my gosh.
And when you read, exactly, and that stops you in your tracks. That
It
stops you
sure
in your
does.
tracks when you realise that's the stakes that we're playing for. You know,
Just
this
got chills.
isn't. Exactly. And that moment, I mean, that was in 2019, and that really was a moment of me knowing that what we are doing is exactly the right thing. I mean, when you
Yeah.
realize that that's the difference you're making.
Isn't that amazing? Being able to have such a difference because you can read means that you can work indoors and have a job where it's safe, where you're protected from the elements, where you have a better chance at benefits and finances and being able to take care of your family, take care of yourself. It's amazing what a simple skill of reading can do for people.
Yeah, that, and we don't stop to think it. I don't think how privileged we are, but it's a really great example, isn't it, of what I was saying right at the beginning, and that reading opens the pathway to new worlds. It's just that in
Mm.
that particular instance, it's so fundamental to that person's, good life, basically, ability to live a long and healthy life, simply because they're able to get a job that's at a desk rather than outside. Well, that's quite overwhelming, actually.
Go
It's
ahead.
quite overwhelming to think of that, isn't it?
It is. It is.
But it does show how fundamental reading is to
It's
everybody's life, wherever you are in the world.
It is. It's fundamental and it's basic survival. And like you said, we are privileged to be able to have the ability to read. And it's the education that really defines a country. A smart country, an educated country is able to take care of its people and be able to thrive. And it's important that we stay educated as a country.
Definitely, definitely.
I'd like to toast to everyone who is learning to read, however old you are, or helping someone learn to read. This is to you. We see you, we believe in you, and we thank you. And Claire, would you like to add anything to this toast?
I mean, I'd love to, but that was pretty comprehensive.
All right. All right. Well, if that's the case, here's to all of you, and we'll see you again. And thanks for joining us. This is Gayvin Powers with Hidden Heroines of History podcast. Thanks for joining me. We have a great lineup this 2026. I can't wait to share it with you. And thank you so much, Claire, for joining me today. Have a great day.
My pleasure. And you. Have a great day.
Bye bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this, like, share, and subscribe. We have more amazing episodes planned. You can listen to them on the Hidden Heroines of History podcast on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and iHeartRadio.